Entering the atmosphere in T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined by Doominal Crossing. What's going on, Doom? How are you?
It's pretty good, Andy. The eve of Echo's anniversary further approaches, but we're not quite there yet. And in fact, we got another holiday to celebrate first, so we thought it would be very appropriate to do that holiday justice with today's episode, as you can see in our title.
Indeed. Indeed, we are close to Halloween, and first and foremost, actually, I wanted to thank you and Dak for holding it down last week, and we thought it was going to be a full house today, but Dak got stuck at work, so it's just you and I rocking it. So we might have to bandy about here for a little bit before we actually get started on what we're going to talk about today, because we are indeed going to be discussing the scariest moments / monsters in the Metroid series, which is something that I think we've sort of kind of touched on a little bit before, but we thought it'd just be some good old-fashioned Halloween fun to do it again. And I wanted to talk about some places, actually, that I thought should be scary, but aren't. So I'm excited to talk about that as well. Before we get going, though, got your Halloween candy ready? You all set for the big day on, what day is it today? Monday? So it's, what, Thursday?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm pretty much working, like, not just Halloween, but that entire Halloween weekend, which sucks, because I was going to go to a friend's Halloween party, and it's still going to go after work, but then I have to get up at, 7 a.m. the next day, and so it's just like, man, I get off at 10 the previous day. It's like, I have to go home and just sleep, because there's no way I'm going to be able to make it through that next day of work after that, especially going to, like, a Halloween party. So, hey, there's always next year, but this year.
Those are tough, too, because you can't call in sick, because everybody knows,
Yeah.
nobody believes it. It sucks if you're, like, legitimately sick, because, like, nobody buys it. I tried to do that myself a time or two in the past, and I didn't get very far. But yeah, so I mean, we don't have a lot going on Halloween ourselves. We have a big box of candy, kind of hoping that none of the kids come to our door so that we can eat said candy. So hopefully that turns out. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get into it. Let's talk about some of Metroid's scariest and creepiest and most outrageous monsters and areas. And I don't know, maybe if we have time left over, which I think we might. Let's talk about just Halloween in general. Maybe some of our favorite, like, Halloween movies, Halloween shows, Halloween stuff. I don't know. I think that could be a little bit fun to get into. I don't want to say too much, actually, about my favorite movies, because I do have an episode coming out on Halloween, actually. It's a double header of the Great Metroid Area Ranking and the Zelda Cast Top 10s, where we are going to be talking about Halloween movies. So I'll keep that one a little bit closer to the chest, but definitely Halloween games. I think we can talk a little bit about some of our favorites there. So
yeah. Well, speaking of Great Metroid Area Ranking, that's kind of where I got the idea to do this episode in the first place, because we were doing our final selections for our two picks for the next Great Metroid Area Ranking, and there's a certain level that we're definitely going to talk about today that I decided to pick specifically because the next episode would land on Halloween, and then I figured, wait a minute, why aren't we not taking this to the main podcast? Like, we need, we need some juice in the main podcast too. This is a perfect idea for an episode. Yeah. And so we just kind of rolled with it.
And that's a great point. Like, we tried to theme the Great Metroid Area Ranking this month for, like, all the creepy locations, at least the ones that we haven't done so far. So that's coming out on Halloween. It's, like I said, it's a double header. And I wanted to save everything for Halloween. I ended up releasing the virtual theater stuff a little bit early, but yeah, everyone listening or everyone subscribed should have a good day on Thursday. That being said, though, let's get into it here, because I feel like the Metroid series has no shortage of scary, creepy areas, and I guess, like, scary, creepy sequences as well. Like there's a lot of things that are like scary in the series, but they're not like the area dependent, which we'll go over as well. So yeah, let's start off here and let's get going. I think for me, there's two areas that immediately come to mind when I think of like scary areas, I guess, in the Metroid series. And I think let's start with the one that probably everyone is expecting us to start with, and rightfully so, and that is the wrecked ship from Super Metroid. Kind of the OG scary area, if you will, full of ghosts and weird robots and creepy sounds and just a very like foreboding kind of feel to it. Like there's something not quite right with that ship.
Yeah, I adore the wreck ship so much. I think it's no wonder I want to say this is the first Super Metroid mapping Metroid that we did was the wreck ship. I could be wrong. I remember this is before I was on the podcast, but I was still kind of like an affiliate, and I vividly remember like you asked me like, "Hey, what do you think would be good at?" I'm like, you guys haven't done Super Metroid yet. Let's do wreck ship. I think that would be a knockout episode right there, and everyone was kind of on board. Like, yeah, that's a great idea.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I am a huge fan of the wreck ship. I love when Metroid has really nice juxtapositions, and I feel like the wreck ship like totally encompasses everything I love about that. Because right before then, it's right when you have the theme of Samus Aran introduction. You got the power bombs. Maybe you go back and you get the grapple beam if you're not a speedrunner and you still need to use that to get across. But you have this very triumphant, emphatic anthem that kind of celebrates this full circle that you've made back into Criteria. It's like this big celebration. You feel like you're on top of the world, and then you find this sketch, abandoned ship, complete tonal shift. You have like it almost the music almost echoes and reverberates off the walls. The save stations are completely dismantled. There's no power. Like everything about this feels like you're out of your depth. And then, of course, you follow that up with an awesome boss fight in Phantoon to restore the power. It's a short area that really leaves an impact on you, and I feel like, despite its size, I feel like it's one of my personal favorite areas in Super Metroid, just because of how powerful and impactful it is.
I think that's like fair. And one thing I think that really kind of added to the mystique of the wreck ship was for the longest time, and I mean there's no official confirmation of anything, but like you didn't really know like what the deal with the wreck ship was, like how it got there, what happened to it, why it's wrecked and not just a regular ship. You could certainly infer that Phantoon had something to do with it. You can certainly kind of infer maybe that this could be something similar to what you saw in Metroid Zero Mission, that ship that crashed down. There's the same couple of enemies that are on both ships there. So there's lots of like theories and lots of ideas about what this ship could be, but no like solid answers, which I actually think is like kind of cool. Like I was kind of saying this on the ZeldaCast the other day, but there are times where I really like to have like solid concrete answers for things that make sense in the plot, and then there's other times where I like not knowing, and wreck ship is kind of one of the instances that falls into the latter category there. So I like that it just showed up. But yeah, the thing that always sticks out to me, you mentioned it, was that the save stations don't work. That was very like nerve-wracking as is like a newer player when I first played it, particularly playing it on the Super Nintendo, because there was like no save states or anything like that. So like if you made a mistake, like I mean, granted, you're probably only going back to Samus's ship, but it's still, you're dead, and they didn't come back online, the save stations, until after you'd beaten the boss, which is a pretty different approach than basically every other area in the game.
A different approach to any Metroid game in general. Like, when has a mechanic like that really ever come back?
Yeah, you might have got me there. I'm not sure. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah, because I've talked about this before. I didn't play Super Metroid until the Wii Virtual Console, like right before Prime 3 came out. And at this point, you know, I had a fair bit of experience with the Metroid series, but like that was something that always stuck out to me because I'd never seen anything like that before. It was like, here's this, you know, this game that's like over 10 years old and it's still doing stuff that I as a player had never experienced before, and that just kind of blew me away at that time.
Yeah, so I mean, Wreck Ship for sure, I feel like is kind of like the poster child area for like a haunted, creepy Metroid area, and it's got a lot of great things that I think really kind of lend it that credibility as well. From everything that we talked about, the music I think is an underrated one. I remember saying on the Mapping Metroid episode that I didn't love the music, and I don't necessarily love the music in the same context as the other tracks, where like you can't listen to it on its own and it doesn't hit the same way, but like when you're playing it, man, it sounds really good, really immersive, really, I don't know, like unsettling, I guess.
I disagree. I love this piece of music so much. I adore the Wreck Ship. It's one of my favorite pieces in the game. I think Minako Hamano, who's you know, one of the two composers on Super Metroid, she did an incredible job, and it exemplifies one of my favorite aspects of Metroid, that kind of diegetic barrier that just barely separates the two realms together. And it's specifically in the two variations of the theme, where the first one, you have this piece of music, and then once the power is restored, you start having all these intricate circuitry instruments, you know, and boards just like interwoven like into the very instrumentation itself. And it feels so seamless too. And it's like, it's such a cool effect. And then also, a user by the name of Unknown, they did a really good version of this on the Harmony of a Hunter Returns album, and that's definitely one of my favorite tracks on the album, is their kind of recreation of that theme. I thought they did a wonderful job paying homage to that.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll check that out. So yeah, that's like the poster child area for scary Metroid areas. But I'll actually be honest with you, like maybe it's just because I've played Super Metroid like just, I couldn't even tell you how many times, but the one that actually, like, when I think of a frightening, unsettling area that comes up in my mind, and I know it's pretty high on your list too, is the GFS Valhalla, which I think and that's from Metroid Prime 3. This has got to be like one of the creepier, I actually personally would say it's probably the creepiest area in the Metroid series, and for a lot of different reasons. The music, the atmosphere, we were chatting about maybe what our thumbnails should look like before this, and there's a few choices that we're not going to go with, but absolutely don't look very good. They are former Galactic Federation soldiers. I think like everything about it is really just kind of unsettling, and I think like an underrated aspect of that is even the position of the GFS Valhalla itself in space, because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, like everything's red, so that kind of seems to me like you're somewhat close to like a supernova or something like that. So even like the position itself is kind of creepy.
Yeah. So in the introduction, when Dane is giving like, you know, all like the plot synopsis to the hunters, he mentions that like I believe it was 4 months ago, the GFS Valhalla got lost in the Klar Nebula, it's called. And so you actually see that nebula like when you land on the ship, and it looks really beautiful on the outside, creepy as hell once you get inside, and like a really good job of like setting that tone in an atmosphere, this very blood red that kind of seeps throughout the entire ship.
I'm such a sucker for when Metroid like kind of works space into like its areas too. Like I was playing Metroid Prime Hunters yesterday, and I was in Celestial Archives, and I was like, God, this area is sweet, because you're like jumping throughout space and stuff like that. We'll talk about another area actually coming up pretty quickly that you do the same thing. But one of the best pieces, or the best set pieces in the Valhalla is when like the airlocks go and everybody starts to get sucked outside. Like, God, that's awesome. It's it kind of reminds me of Dead Space actually, which I actually think Corruption predates Dead Space by maybe a year.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, the original Dead Space was 2008. So yeah, Corruption came out the year prior. Maybe even a few months prior. I can't remember if that was a holiday title, if that was early 2008, but yeah.
and I love Dead Space. Like, that game is awesome. Actually, I've been meaning to play the remake, but obviously they don't have that up for Switch yet. So, actually, super quick side story here. We're talking about. I know we said we talk about this later. We could follow up on this, but I decided I wanted to replay Alien Isolation, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play more of it if I have it on the Switch. So I downloaded it on the Switch. Do you know how long this game took to download?
Oh, I can imagine probably a long time. Switch games take forever to download.
Guess. Guess how many hours?
I'm gonna guess 9 hours.
Double it.
Oh, 18 hours, almost a whole day.
Dude, I was like they're working on banking hours here, 3 to 5 business days for getting that downloaded. It was absolutely unreal. But yeah, anyways, maybe we'll talk more about Alien Isolation after. But yeah, like I feel like what really works for me is like all those kind of like the set pieces like that, and like the airlock, and the general just kind of lack of enemies, but they only show up very specifically in some spots. And this could, and for me, the way that I will typically play Metroid Prime Corruption, this is the first time that you actually are confronted with a Hunter Metroid, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. You there was a word you used to describe earlier that I thought fit perfectly, and I can't remember what you said, but like, so I never really consider Metroid like a horror series. I don't even necessarily think it has horror moments, but it has these areas and moments that make you feel very uncomfortable. They make you feel, they make you feel tense, and I feel like nothing exemplifies that better than the Valhalla. It's this area where you're just like, man, I don't want to be here right now. But not in like a dreadful way where it's like, oh god, we got to do this again. It's like, but like you can feel that the hair almost standing up, even when you know what's going to happen. Even if you know it's not really that challenging of an area, it just has this discomforting mood and atmosphere that it gives you the ick. It gives you the ick, but in a good way. It's
just very like, it's very apprehensious. You feel like there's a certain tension or a certain level of anxiety because and I feel like I feel like that works in horror games, and like the scariest horror games are usually the ones where like you don't know what's around the corner, you don't know what's coming out, and I feel like that's kind of like the idea here, and also like I feel like there's too just like something kind of inherently creepy about like an area or a ship in this case where something horrible has happened, and something horrible has happened. Like you see all these soldiers everywhere, and it looks pretty bad, and you learn that the Aurora unit's been stolen, and it's kind of different, I feel like, from the Aether in Metroid Prime 2, because like you see what happens there, and that's kind of creepy in its own way, but I feel like this one kind of hits more because there's that mystery of like what exactly happened, how exactly did this go down, that I feel like is again one of those things that's kind of better left unsaid.
Well, I mean, technically, you can see a little bit of what went down if you were one of the few people that got to witness the Prime 3 preview channel. That's something we definitely have to discuss on a future episode, because I have a lot of mixed thoughts on that channel. Like, I definitely have a positive nostalgia to it, but a lot of cut content that that's a whole other thing. I'm not going to get into that right now. That's not what this episode is about. You brought up the Aurora unit thing, and I think that might be like the climax of the creepy factor of this area. That message, when you first discover that, is just so uncomfortable. The way you can slowly hear like you hear it dying in real time and slowly being corrupted by, Dark Samus of the Phazon or whatever, as it's like locking in the coordinates of phase. The way its voice continuously deepens, it's so unsettling. I love getting to that message every single time. It still gets me every single time, even though I know exactly what's coming. But like, man, it's such an effective tool, and I love that you can totally just go through that area and totally miss it. It's just one of those things that, like, if you're an eagle-eyed player and you're looking, you're scanning everything, it's just one of those things you can happen to stumble upon.
Yeah, you know what? You actually brought up a great point. Not to get like sidebarred into this, but You're right. I haven't seen that preview trailer in a long time, which it really is a shame that you can't find these trailers anywhere. But it's like some cool like Blair Witch Project stuff going on here. Like it's you can kind of see this like grainy black and white of the ship, and you definitely know that some bad stuff is going down. So it's kind of cool actually. I wish that there was a way to like see this in modern, I guess, like footage, or not footage, but like in modern quality.
Yeah.
Valhalla is the one for me that I think is the creepiest, which isn't to say that the rest of these areas I don't think have their own elements of like, the chill factor that you get when you go to them, but I don't think that anything for me kind of comes close to the Valhalla. It's a different kind of like creepy from here.
I agree. I like, if Wreck Ship is the poster child, I feel like Valhalla is like I don't know what the modern kind of like comparison would be, but it's like if
how about
this? I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
The Wreck Ship is like Michael Jordan. And Valhalla is like LeBron, okay? And you could argue which one's better, but you'd probably have a compelling case for both of them. And that's kind of how I feel here. I would say, we didn't compare lists or anything like that before we started. No, I didn't really make a list. I just jotted down a few areas that I've always kind of regarded as pretty creepy. And actually, I'm going to go right back to Metroid Prime 3 and go to the Xeno Research Station, which, as you know, is a little offshoot of the planet Elysia and Skytown. This is a creepy spot too. One, because it's the first time that you see Metroids in the game, which is always pretty creepy. Like I remember, the first time you see them in Phendrana, that's kind of scary. But it's only like a fleeting moment, and they become kind of regular, I guess, after that. I feel like here the tension is because you see them and you walk past them, and the design of the Xeno Research Station is pretty creepy in and of itself. But like you see the Metroids and you know they're getting free, and it's just a matter of how and when. And I feel like that tension, they really kind of milk it, because it's a while before everything actually releases and like the lights go out, except all like the glowing stuff, and it's a very, very cool set piece from the game.
It really is a brilliant sequence. I love the Xeno Research hallway. And then also they also milk it a little bit before you even see the Metroids. One of the doors you open has one of those space pirate husks, and it does that ear-piercing scream every single time one of those husks gets broken, and so you get a little bit of a jump scare at first. They also do that in the Valhalla too. We forgot to mention that, and it's just as creepy there as well. But yeah, I remember playing Corruption for the first time, and immediately I got to the hall, and it's like, all right, so these are the Metroids I'm fighting. When are we doing this? And then you get to the secret missile room, and then you just immediately know exactly how it's going to go down.
Yeah. You
see the secret missile. It's blocked behind that exact same barrier that's blocking the Metroids, and there just is a convenient little energy cell right next to it, and you immediately know it's like, all right, there's only one way to go.
That's kind of one of the proud like tropes in horror in video games in particular. Like you get to a point, an item that you need, but you know that if you unlock whatever is blocking it, everything else is going to come out too. And Metroid uses it to great effect in the Xeno Research Station here.
Can we do some brief Alien Romulus spoilers here? The movie's been out for a while now, because I alluded to this.
Yeah, okay. I think
can
that's
we?
fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So
if you have not seen Alien Romulus, first of all, you should see it. Second of all, skip ahead like 60 seconds.
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider it a major spoiler. Like, it's not like a big character reveal or anything. It's it involves the face huggers. They're in, but yeah. I alluded to this the episode we recorded after you and Goo talked about that episode, and that scene where the face huggers are introduced just totally reminded me of the Xeno Research, because it basically functions the exact same way, where there's a door that they have to unlock, and the way to unlock it is to literally pull this power cell out of the wall, and then doing so also unleashes all of the galaxy's most deadliest aliens. And it's like,
that's
to a T. It's probably just a coincidence that they're lined up so well, but I still gotta give a W to the sauce there. So good.
That was just a great moment, and one of those moments too that like as soon as I saw it, I was just like, yes, that's such a video game thing to do, you know. So I loved it actually. I thought that was fantastic. Yeah, so I didn't know if you had. I thought you would, but I didn't know if you'd put down the Xeno Research Station. But for my money, I think it's a pretty creepy area as far as, again, like kind of, if the other two were Jordan and LeBron, this one's maybe like, I don't know, KD.
The Steph Curry.
Steph Curry, I think might be his. I shouldn't make like a ton of basketball analogies because I'm not like the best in basketball, but I think Steph is maybe just a step above. That's a creepy area, you know.
Okay, gotcha. Well, so when I originally proposed the episode, I was just thinking of like creepy areas in general, but I kind of like what you did and extrapolated it to like creepy moments, because there are a lot of like, because like I wouldn't consider Skytown like a scary area at all, but
No.
the Xeno Research sequence is definitely, if you're talking about moments, I think it's a top 5 contender. I think that's absolutely up there.
And like I kind of did the same as you. Like I didn't like generally I just stuck to areas in general, but I did make an exception for this because I think number one, it's like a fairly self-contained little part of Eastern Skytown, and number two, it really is like a pretty impactful sequence, I feel like. So it's probably about as big as like going into like Torian or Elon or something. Maybe not quite as big, but you know what I mean. I think it's big enough to warrant a mention.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty small area, but like again, much like Wreck Ship, for how small it is, it leaves a huge impact on your play through the game, which is saying a lot considering Valhalla is also in that game, which I think we both agree is like the pinnacle of like scariest moments in Metroid.
Which is actually great because you kind of like I anticipate the Valhalla, but I always kind of forget how kind of sneaky scary the Xeno Research Station is.
Yeah, it really catches you off guard. You know, you're just kind of exploring like, you know, the space pirate controlled portions of Skytown, and you don't really get these hints of Metroids. And then again, you just open that one door with the crumpling space pirate hucks, and then it's like the entire tone just shifts like that.
That's
it's
good
just
stuff.
it's such a good it's just such a good reversal there.
All right, so I have a few more areas that I've always thought were they make me a little bit uncomfortable. Before I kind of go on a spiel here though, Doom, I don't want to hijack the show. Any areas that you want to bring up and talk about?
I feel like this is one that you're going to bring up, but I kind of want to talk about it too. But like, I feel like we got to shout out the OG NES Torian in terms of like starting, you know, the creepy Metroid, area trend. Like, and granted, OG Metroid in general is definitely like a very dark, moody, and atmospheric game in general, but Torian is where it just all really comes together. And especially with, you know, the difficulty spike that, well, I wouldn't say Ridley's more where the difficulty spike begins, but you know, considering how much more difficult, you know, OG Metroid is compared to a lot of the other 2D Metroid games, like, man, it does such a good job of that. And of course, you got Hip Tanaka's just brilliantly creepy score with like, you know, these organic arpeggios just illuminating the whole thing, this very biomechanical essence, you know, creating this tapestry for the environment. And like the Metroids, they just zap at you and they will rush down you if you're not careful. And so not only is the area itself creepy, but like the challenge feels like it meets that criteria as well. And so yeah, OG Metroid Torian definitely has to get a shout out.
Yeah, I was gonna if you would have just said like no, go ahead. I was about to say Torian. I mean, it really is like it's a and I was gonna say both Super Metroid and Nestroid, but I want to focus on Nestroid first because you're 100% right. I think it's actually pretty fair to say that even with Ridley, which is pretty tough, like there is a significant jump in difficulty, particularly with the Zebatites in Torian, which. You're right. Like it does kind of add to the tension and add to the challenge, but it really is those Metroids that appear out of nowhere. And I think that this is what like the Metroid series does very well, generally speaking, is they understand that when it comes to Metroids, that less is more. And you could basically say the same thing about Torian and Super Metroid here too, where like you build up the Metroid threat throughout the whole game, but you don't really see them until you're at the final like boss area, and the Metroids come out of nowhere. Like they're fast, and they seem threatening. Like it's a cautious march when you're in Torian, and you've almost got like a little trigger finger. You're the trigger happy because you know that that those Metroids could be spawning out at any moment, and it's actually like an area where like the limitations of the hardware actually kind of make it work a little bit better, because those Metroids, like, they just show up out of nowhere and you're like, god, there's Ice Beam, where are you at? So I think it actually like really works to create a very tense atmosphere.
It's also pretty ballsy because, like, nowadays, you know, we pretty much all know Metroid weakness. You know, you freeze them, fire some missiles or one super missile, and they're done, whatever. But, like, back in 1986, like, your average player, you know, they didn't know that off the top of their head. That wasn't, like, common knowledge by any means. And especially in a game like NES Metroid, where you have to switch between the ice and wave beams, you could go into Torian and just not be able to defeat those Metroids. No. You might just have to, like, run past them. And on your first playthrough, you're not surviving that. Good luck. And so I think that's a really ballsy move to do back then, and I kind of respect it.
Yeah, like if you're playing Nestroid and you have the Ice Beam, don't even go into Torian, like, because it's a tough scene. And you're right, like, and I would also suggest that, like, there's probably, particularly back in the day when people were playing it before a place like OmegaMetroid.com existed, you probably don't have everybody getting all of the necessary missiles that you need, and so you could very quickly find yourself low on supplies defeating these Metroids. And I think the same kind of is applicable to Super Metroid. I feel like it's a little bit different, the Torian there, because it's not quite as dark, it's not quite as bleak, but there is kind of a different sort of tension and a different type of fear that you have, because you are taking out Metroids, yes. However, you can see like all these husks everywhere, and I feel like for me, when I was, you know, playing it for the first time, I knew that the baby Metroid was somewhere in this in this place, and I kind of felt a little bit apprehensive as I got closer to wanting to make sure that like the thing was okay, and that kind of leads to the devastating ending of this game. But yeah, I think that this area, it's not quite as scary as Nestroid version, but it's like, oof.
I call Super Metroid's version scary. It's still a fantastic area, and I mean, again, like the dialogueless environmental storytelling that area alone does is just still incredible. Like, you know, 30 years later. But yeah, I'd actually give a shout out to Zero Mission just because one the opening cutscene is fantastic, but also I love the way that the Metroids fade in from the background. I don't know why. There's something about the way that they just materialize in Zero Mission that's really creepy.
It's kind of like how the NES version worked, but like in a way that feels like actually like intentional.
Yeah, like they're almost coming out of the foreground rather than just like rushing you from, you know, this little 4x3 box. It's still equally effective, I think. Especially in that one room where there's like 3 rows, and if you don't know that it's a trap and you accidentally like activate like 4 of them that start rushing you down, oh man, get out of there.
It's
except you can't, because in Zero Mission they lock the doors behind you, so you're trapped in there.
Yeah,
you ain't going nowhere.
If you don't defeat these Metroids in Super and in Zero Mission, like you're toast. Like literally, you can't go anywhere. So I like that too. But yeah, Torian was definitely on my list here. Let me keep it old school and also go. I'm going to again kind of do a 2-for-1 special here. But I am going to suggest to you, I actually think this might be my Steph Curry. Because I think of everything else, I feel like this is maybe my number 3 creepiest moment. And can you guess what I'm talking about here? I am talking
I'm guessing
about
I'm guessing it's from Metroid 2, but go on.
You got it. You're 100% correct. I'm talking about the Genetics Lab, aka Area 8 from both Metroid 2 and the remake AM2R. Both of them, I feel like, are just creepy, like very creepy. And most of it's due to the music. Most of it is just like this really creepy music starts playing, like and it kind of ramps up and ramps up as you get deeper into Area 8. And in both, I don't know if I want to say 100% with certainty in AM2R, but for sure in Return of Samus, like, there are no enemies at all, basically in the entirety of Area 8, which I feel like kind of adds to it, because you're like, this place is so terrifying, nothing dares, like, make its home here, and if they did, they probably were eaten by all the Metroids. So I think that, like, it's just a very kind of, like, unsettling area to be in. The imagery, particularly as you get up to the top, you can see like all these test tubes and all that kind of stuff in the background. It kind of makes you think, like, again, like, something horrible happened here, like something went out of control, which I feel like really for me is like adding to the ambiance of the area. But I think it's mostly the music. It's just a very unsettling kind of track, and AM2R did a brilliant job of recreating that.
Yeah, we talked about back in Tori and the use of limitations to make something beautiful. I've always said I think Metroid 2 is like one of the best titles in the series when it comes to like using its limitations as an advantage. I've always loved that little. I'm not even sure like how intentional of a storytelling device it was, but just the deeper you go into SR3D8, the less enemies you encounter until finally you get to the final area and there's just no enemies left except for the Metroids. Mm-hmm. Kind of like showing off this, this food chain almost, and showing the Metroids very, very much so at the top, especially, at their most peak forms. And and especially in Metroid 2, like those Metroids are no pushovers. Especially if it's your first time playing, like they will put up a fight, and you definitely feel like you're taking on like the heart of the food chain there. In SR388, and then like you mentioned, especially the background imagery, particularly because in Metroid 2, a lot of those backgrounds during the second to last couple of areas do kind of start to blend together. But then once you do get to that final nest, things really do start to change. You get a lot more of that artificial architecture that does kind of hint at a lot more sinister things to come. And obviously now we know the full story of SR3D8, but like again, if you're a player playing in 1991, like it's intriguing, it's disturbing almost.
Mm-hmm. It really is, because it does kind of seem like this failed experiment that just, and like I remember thinking, and I guess there's like sort of an element of truth to this, but not really, because it's been retconned to Metroid Dread. But I was like, is it, and I'm sure a lot of people thought this, but I was like, the Chozo created the Metroids grew beyond their control, Metroids eliminated the Chozo. Like, I think that was a pretty natural line of thinking for a lot of people, because like one of the big mysteries for so long in Metroid, and I guess like still kind of sort of, is like, what happened to the Chozo? Where'd they go? Did they like ascend? Did they go in the black hole, like ascend to 4D, or like what's going on? And that was always something that I thought about, was like, these Metroids, they maybe they turned against their creators. And the other thing I think that works too is like right before you fight the Queen Metroid, you hear like that variant of its theme where it's just like the
yeah, oh, so good.
What about trying to,
and you can
like,
actually
what's that called? Like, what's musically? What's that called?
I don't really know what instrument, like, the specific Game Boy was trying to replicate in that point.
Whatever,
but it's definitely
like,
it's
awesome.
definitely it's a very low end, like kind of a crunchy note that you're or a chord that you're talking about, which I love. I also love that you can also hear like the Queen just kind of echoing in the background, like that in that room before. And then of course it's amplified once you actually get to that room. But I love that you could just kind of hear that beforehand. Like, she's so loud that you can actually like hear her through the walls. She is so angry and just, devastated at like, at what you've just done. And so that whole, that whole boss fight is so unique too, just in general, because like I know we're talking about like the horror aspects, but it's so unique how literally like if you're like low on health, you could just bomb the floor and escape that fight, and then kind of circle back around, replenish your health, and then do it all over again. Really unique thing that that no other game does, and that all stuck out to me too.
I feel like the Queen Metroid fight in Metroid 2 has like the biggest build up, or feels like as big of a fight as any fight in the series, except for maybe the one exception is Ridley in Super Metroid. But like the build up to that Queen Metroid fight, like the whole game, I feel like also adds to the tension too, because you're just like, this is it, like one left. So everything about the genetics lab really works. You know what, I don't really love like comparing Samus Returns and AM2R and Metroid 2, but I will say, and I've complained about this before, and I'm sure I'll complain about it again, but man, what were they doing with that music in Area 8 and the Queen Metroid fight? That was just like such a miss. Like such a miss.
The Queen Metroid fight, I do agree. The genetics lab though, I adore the Torian arrangement they have there. That might actually be my favorite Torian arrangement. It's in my top 10 tracks in the whole series. I love that theme to death. It's like that is like it is peak theme. It is peak, like you know me. I love when Metroid music gets gross and disgusting, and that is such a disgusting organic theme, and it works on every level for me. That being said, though, I do miss that traditional genetics lab that was
That's
also an
awesome.
AM2R as well.
That's incredible stuff. I mean the area itself and the fight, the Queen Metroid fight in this game is amazing. I would probably suggest easily the best of the 3 games, but the atmosphere takes a little bit of a hit in return for that, which is a little bit too bad. Okay, on to the next. I actually only have one more area that I put down that I thought was really kind of creepy here, Doom. So I'll pass it back to you. What's another one that sticks out for you?
Yeah, there was I'm not sure if you have this one, because when I mentioned it before we started recording, you looked a little surprised. So I might just talk about it now, since yeah. So it's actually from the most recent game, Metroid Dread, and that is E.M.M.I, where Samus unknowingly stumbles into the last bastion of the X, and they all get released. I don't think this is the creepiest area. We've definitely talked about like by far the creepiest area, but this is I think this is a rare moment where like I actually think the music of Metroid Dread works pretty well in this area and setting up the tone.
Okay.
And I really like, I really think the story beats are pretty effective here. I mean, this is definitely like, I think most people would agree, like the X getting released and like kind of the way that changes the game. It's a lot of people's favorite parts of the game. And I think I'm inclined to agree. Like this is it's a really cool turning point, especially when playing it for the first time and having no idea what was about to happen. Like at this point, like some people like assumed that the X were going to make an appearance, but really nobody knew whether or not the X were like actually still alive, if that was all fabricated. And to actually see them come back fully realized in 3D and like not skimped out on, like oh my gosh, they did the X so much justice. I love their new transformations in this game too. They have this like little pixelated transition and fusion, but in here they like turn into this gross, oily, goopy substance, and like the creatures that they take over, like, you know, look like they're melting, and they look so gross and disgusting.
It looks like that black stuff from Prometheus, actually.
Yeah.
I never connected that dot, but you're right. There is like an oily kind of a texture. Yeah, and just it's on one hand, it's not 100% scary because you're also hyped and excited. You're like, oh my god, the X are back, and like they look better than ever. And so you're also like, and I feel like that bit of like hype and fandom kind of overrides a lot of that scariness. But you take that apart and you kind of look at like the attention to detail put in. I do think that the area, you know, it definitely, like I said, not the creepiest area, but I think it still has a lot going for it. My favorite part, actually, my favorite detail about the area is before you even get introduced to the X,
there's a couple of Chozo soldier husks that you'll pass, and you think it's deceased, but then as you walk by it, the armor just crumbles and there's like no body inside, and it's like a little hint that it's been possessed and is no longer there, but without giving it away. It's such a cool little detail that you don't really pick up on at first, but yeah.
You know what? I think you nailed it, actually. I was about to say, I like Elon a lot, but that's the thing, is like, whenever I go there, and especially the first time, I was just like, holy the axe! Like, it was so awesome. You're right. Like, I didn't think we would see the X. Like, I kind of thought they were done. And I would have been okay with that, actually. But yeah, like, seeing them, I was just like, holy crap! Like, let's go! And so I was like, I was so excited and hyped up that, like, by the time that Elon was all said and done, I was just kind of like, I didn't remember feeling like scared at all. I was just kind of like, that was so awesome. So yeah, that's the only thing that kind of why I didn't put it on my list. I understand why you said it, but I have to admit, I didn't have it on mine. But I'm curious if you'll have this next one on yours. And this is a small area, and this is more of a story element than anything else. But I actually put down the restricted zone for Metroid Fusion, and for, I guess, a couple reasons. Like, number one, like, I know you're only there for like a cup of coffee. However, it really does have that sense that, like, you're really not supposed to see anything in here. Like, it feels pretty out of bounds, and just like seeing the Zeta Metroid and seeing the Gamma Metroid and the test tubes and the SAX coming in, like, and the escape sequence as well. And this is the area I was referencing earlier when I said, like, I love when Metroid kind of brings outer space into, its areas. I think that it was a really cool, really well done area. Probably scary is the wrong word, but it certainly does have that sense of, like, this is something that I shouldn't be seeing. And I think that could be a little bit nerve-wracking in its own kind of sense as well.
I think you nailed it with that last part. It's that feeling that you've stumbled into something that, like, you were not intended to see, and it's completely, like, it's like this massive revelation. It's arguably the revelation in the story. And it just completely recontextualizes everything you've been doing in the game up to that point. And so I definitely agree with you. And it was on my list. I kind of included Sector 6 along with that, just because, like, I know they're technically separate areas, but, like, they're pretty much interconnected together. Yeah. And kind of going off that, the reason I do include Sector 6 is because the first time you go to that area, and you're avoiding all the frozen X parasites that are kind of like, trying to freeze you to death. And I wouldn't really call that a scary sequence, but it's definitely like you're definitely on your toes. You're checking the corners to make sure, because, like, if you get a little too close, they will rush you down. And so you're definitely, it's definitely an area where you're definitely not trying to sprint and go fast, which is not typically what you're doing in 2D Metroid. It's an area where you're specifically trying to slow down, take things in, and, like, actually, like, plot your next move. Like, okay, how am I going to navigate, this this trip mine hallway, basically.
Yeah, so that was the final one I had on my list. I do have a few monsters I want to talk about and a few areas that I want to point out that are not scary, but I feel like they should be. But before we kind of put a bow on this, any other areas that you want to talk about?
Oh yeah, there's a few. I mean, it's kind of a meme at this point, but, like, I got to bring up Frigate Orpheon. I got to bring up Frigate Orpheon. Again, wouldn't really consider it a scary area, but it's got that very discomforting atmosphere that it's not the same type of discomforting atmosphere as Xeno Research or Valhalla, but, like, it's got that thing, like, I think what makes a Metroid discomfort so unique compared to other horror games, like, you're playing Resident Evil, and you feel like you're vulnerable to all the horrors out there, you can very much get eaten into a zombie and become one of them. You're only human. Have very little ammo. That especially in the old games, the aiming is very intentionally hard to do. With Metroid, you're never really in that kind of danger for the most part. You're in an advanced piece of power armor, and in the case of Valhalla, you're literally at like your most powerful point in the game. Like you are in no danger of like dying, but you're seeing all these horrors that happen to everyone else and learning about it. And there's something really disturbing about learning about the atmosphere, just learning about everything that transpired and basically all of this that you weren't able to pull someone out of. And I feel like that's where Metroid discomfort is at its absolute best. It's a little bit different here because it's the space pirates, and so you don't have as much of a physical attachment there as you do with like, say the Marines on the GFS Valhalla who were literally just on a random training mission. But it's still like disturbing, just not only learning about, what happened to the pirates, but also what they were doing to the experiments that ultimately brought this upon them, and learning just, all the cruelty involved in all of that. And just like, it gets really messed up doing that. And so again, I wouldn't really call it a scary area, but I think in terms of its atmosphere, I definitely think that there's a conversation of putting it in that same realm.
Yeah, okay, I could see where you're coming from. I don't know necessarily that I'd be like rushing to agree, but I can see the perspective there. To me, Frigate Orphan is just like a cool intro area. Maybe not as cool as you might like, but I can see that where like when you kind of like look a little bit beyond like the surface, you can infer that there is some definitely gnarly stuff that's going on there. I didn't put it on my list either, but you could almost say the same thing about Phazon Mines when you go there, particularly because it's quite dark in a lot of places, which is almost like a cheat code for just being naturally more frightening. But like you read some of the pirate logs and you start hearing about like these twisted experiments and resurrecting and like, hey, don't feed the Metroids and stuff like that. It's I can almost like take kind of the same logic and apply it to Phazon Mines too, because that's kind of a creepy area in some parts.
Agree to an extent. I think the difference with Phazon Mines is that some of the stuff also has a lot of dark comedy to it, which you don't really get that dark comedy in Frigate Orpheon. It's true. Mostly just whereas Phazon Mines, you're learning about like the space pirates trying to emulate morph ball technology, and it's messed up, but also like it's hilarious. Like it's one of the standout scans in that game is learning about that. And like you said, Metroids are not pets. Do not feed them. Like there's a very ironic, dark comedy to that kind of brings, it brings a little bit of humor to the situation because of specifically how messed up it is, where you don't really get that in Frigate Orpheon.
And that's fair. All right, let's keep on banging them out here. What you got next for us?
We talked about it briefly, and again, it's not really an area; it's more of a sequence. But I would say the GFMC compound Splinter Hive in the beginning of Prime 2, I think definitely would qualify as like a creepy intro sequence. Again, a very short intro sequence, and you get it interspliced, especially once you leave the hive and you get more of those traditional temple grounds as well. But I feel like that first time you really dive into the Splinter Hive, and you're seeing, because at this point, like it's pretty fair to assume that no one made it out, but you don't really know, but you're just kind of stumbling upon it and walking as you go. And then you also have the Ing repossessing these deceased corpses and like attacking them, and even though like from a gameplay sense, like they're easy, they don't really pose much of a challenge, it is kind of a little discomforting, especially in a Metroid game where you don't, other than Metroid Fusion, you don't really get a lot of like reanimated stuff like that.
Yes and no. Here's what I would do. Here's what I would have done, and here's what they should do to make this scene like 10 times more scary if they remake Metroid Prime 2, similarly to how they did with Metroid Prime. Just make it happen at night. Put it at night. Like, I feel like that simple little thing, because like the problem for me is that, and I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of tough guy here. I'm definitely not. Like, but like the problem for me is like, it's hard for me to feel like frightened when it's like broad daylight and there's like these kind of enemies coming from nowhere. I think if they would have just made that scene at night, it'd be a lot creepier, and it could have been like an all-time. I mean, it's a pretty awesome cutscene already, but it could have been like an all-timer.
Well, I'm not talking about the cutscene where like you find the whole squad getting. I'm talking about like when you're in the hive and like they first get possessed in the hive. I feel like that specific hive scene is like where that creepiness factor is. Yeah.
That was kind of creepy. Yeah.
Once you leave the hive and you're on the temple grounds again, that's just kind of like more traditional Metroid gameplay, whatever. But like when you're actually like in the hive itself and you're kind of, and that's when you first, scan the first trooper logs and you kind of see like, I'm kind of reminded of like of Aliens in a way. That whole Marine squad totally reminds me, and I'm sure they were inspired in part by the squad and Aliens as well.
Yeah,
just learning about some of the the way they like start out all tough, but then as the mission progresses, they start going insane and losing their minds.
That's a good point, actually.
Rest in peace, Bill Paxton.
There's some good like trooper like dialogue and lore and stuff like that where you could see people like slowly start to lose it a little bit. That's good writing. And underrated part of Echoes as well. That's a good point. Okay, I want to talk just really quickly here about some. I was looking for the scary areas, and there seems like there should be some areas that seem like no-brainers to include here, but for whatever reason, they just didn't work. And since we're talking about it already, I want to talk about Dark Aether as a whole, because there's certainly some pockets where it's kind of creepy, like the hive you just mentioned. I think like there's the one area where I think it's actually like the same area where the ship is, but like there's Metroids everywhere. It's pretty creepy. So there's definitely some spots of Dark Aether that are kind of frightening, and I don't know if the intention was to have Dark Aether be frightening or not, but for me, it's too much of like a grind in order to feel scary, if that makes sense. So I wanted to say that, but I couldn't quite get there. So I'm almost like reverse, like saying that it's a scary area.
I've never really considered Dark Aether a scary area. I think of it more as an oppressive area, which I think is very fair to call it. That might be a good way to put it, yeah. It's a very oppressive area, and I think depending on who you are, that oppressiveness can work or it can turn you off. Mm-hmm. And I think either of it, I could totally understand. I personally love that oppressive nature of Dark Aether. I could totally understand how someone could go in and be like, this is not for me. I'm kind of turned off, actually. I think either viewpoint is valid.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, it doesn't quite work for me, but it doesn't quite ruin anything for me either. I generally speaking just kind of want to get from point A to point B as quickly as I can, which is kind of antithetical to how I like to play Metroid games. So I would say that about Dark Aether. I did want to shout out Metroid Dread, because I kind of feel for a game called Metroid Dread, there's really not that many like creepy areas in the game, and specifically I'm talking about the E.M.M.I zones, which they're definitely tense, and they're definitely I don't know, they can get your heart pounding, but I can't say that they're scary because they're so bright and light and shiny that it kind of makes it hard to feel threatened. Maybe not threatened, because you certainly do feel threatened, but it's hard to feel like you're in as much danger as you actually really are, because those E.M.M.Is can one-shot you, but the atmosphere, and we've kind of talked about this in some Dread episodes before, I feel like the downfall there was making all the E.M.M.I zones kind of the same theming across the board. I wish that they could, like, imagine an E.M.M.I zone in Dairon where it was dark, like when you first go into Dairon. Like, that would have been awesome. That would have been so awesome.
That would have been sick.
Yeah.
Just a total blind E.M.M.I run, and the only thing you see is like that one red light, and right. you have that and like its sound cues, and that's it. That would rock so much. I would be all in for that.
I feel like that's just money, and they went the other direction. And I'm not here to like dump on the E.M.M.Is. I think that they're like an incredible part of Metroid Dread, but I kind of just don't feel like they're scary. And for a game called Metroid Dread, I feel like they should be scarier than they are.
I agree with that. They definitely provide to be on your first playthroughs. First couple of playthroughs, maybe even, they definitely provide a challenge, and that challenge is that challenge and that sense of like, okay, here we go again. Like, that's definitely present, but I do agree that sense of like discomfort of being disturbed it's not present at all, I would say.
I don't think so.
Which I do think is a missed opportunity, and that's coming from someone who loves the E.M.M.I zones and loves Metroid Dread by and large.
Yeah, me too. It's one of my favorite Metroid games, but I do think they could have ramped it up a little bit there, the actual Dread, because like once you and like this is on your first playthrough, but like once you kind of get a feel for the E.M.M.I zones, like it's not scary at all. You kind of know exactly what to do, and once you figure out that you could basically just outrun the E.M.M.Is, it's kind of like, well, okay, I never need to use the Phantom Cloak ever, so that's cool.
Yeah, once you get the what you call the flash shift, once you get that, E.M.M.I zones are like, all right, we're just going right to the other side. We're not even gonna worry about it anymore.
You know what? I will say actually, the E.M.M.I zone in Ferenia with the water, that one can be intense.
Yeah.
But it's just,
that's a good
like,
one.
It's not scary, you know? Like, hey,
yeah.
It's scary.
I 100% agree.
And you know what? I feel like you might disagree with this, but I'm gonna throw it out there anyways. I was kind of thinking to myself, while there are certainly moments in the game, I don't know that any one of the sectors in Metroid Fusion beyond the restricted zone really sticks out for me for having like that creepy kind of atmosphere and vibe. Maybe Sector 6, like maybe, but even then kind of like, yeah.
No, I think I agree with that actually. Other than like, again, specific sequences, and the first one that I'm thinking of is the power going out on the elevator. That's a really good sequence, but I also wouldn't really consider like the main deck like a scary area.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Xeno Research, where it's a very specific portion of that area. That's a really good portion. And again, same thing with the power going out in the elevator. Fantastic portion right there, but I wouldn't consider the area as a whole a scary area. Nightmare, definitely a creepy, very uncomfortable looking boss, and you kind of, as you're fighting it, you're kind of weighing, kind of the ethical factors, especially like with the way Adam describes it, that it's, it's a bioweapon basically.
Yeah.
And so that's always running through your head too. But that's just one boss fight in a whole area. And so I think I would actually agree with you there that like, Fusion, the areas themselves, I wouldn't really call them as a whole scary, but I think it has a lot of really good moments, I think, that make up for it and service the atmosphere well.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I agree with that. I've got one more actually that I want to show. This is an area that should be scary, but it is the total opposite of scary, and I'm going to pick on a game that everybody is probably tired of us picking on, but damn it, it's worth picking on. This is from Metroid Other M, and here's a little plug. I'm going to be talking about this area more in depth on the Great Metroid Area Ranking this month, actually. This is the Bioweapons Research Center. Now, the reason that this area should be scary, you fight a Queen Metroid, you see the husk of Ridley. Ridley is like literally been eaten, and there's his remains that are lying around. And you find out that the Madeline Bergman you've been talking to this whole game is not, in fact, Madeline Bergman. You find the real survivor there. So this should be this pretty big, startling reveal. However, it
is not, to put it mildly.
A bunch of things coalesce here to make sure that this moment is like the total opposite of scary, and it's just like, it's almost like watching Looney Tunes on Saturday. But you know what? It's also great. There's nothing wrong with Looney Tunes, but this area is one that's just like, this should be awesome, but oh my god, it's comically, it's kind of like a slasher film, like the low budget ones where they intentionally like have like the mismatched costumes and continuity errors and stuff like that. You're just like, oh god. That's almost what this area is.
A Neil Breen slasher film. There you go.
Yeah, it's. I can't wait to talk about it actually more in depth, because this is something else. This area.
I will say it's not really definitely not a scary moment, but I do like that one hallway that with all the Rinka turrets that just kind of like onslaught you right before you get in there.
That is pretty.
That is really cool. Not scary, but I do like that.
And you know what? That's the thing about Other M. Like, it has a lot of cool stuff, but there's just like every time it's doing something really awesome, and like you're just like, oh, okay, now now I'm feeling it. It does something where like just slips on a banana peel and you just kind of go back to the beginning. So I will talk more about this if anyone wants to pay a couple bucks on our Patreon, and we'll have some more words about this area here. But I did want to shout out those areas because they were areas or like games that kind of immediately came to my mind, and then when I started thinking about it, I was like, you know what, this doesn't really fit like what we're talking about. So wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. On that same note, the first time I played Federation Force, I was pretty horrified seeing what they did to our girl Samus. I was very, very horrified at that. Probably not the way we wanted to be horrified, but yeah.
You know, I will say, I think that Federation Force, it has one mission which is kind of tense in the game, and it's one of the best missions actually in the game, where you go outside of your mech and you have to. It's like a stealth sequence where you have to like run past all the space pirates and stuff like that. I'm not gonna sit here and tell anybody it's like a masterpiece of a level or anything like that, but as far as the levels in the game go, it's pretty. It's as heart pounding as anything else that you're gonna find in that game. So shout out to that level. Yeah. That's all I got for it. But yeah, that's my list of areas that, well, they're not scary, but I think that they should be. I also think that we would be remiss, and we don't have to talk about them for, you know, a long time or any time really, but we definitely got to shout out some of the classic monsters in this series. I mean, Nightmare, that's kind of like the one I think of.
I mean, I was literally just talking about it earlier. I feel like that alone is just like one of the scary highlights of Fusion.
Very creepy, disturbing enemy in the game. I also, when I think of monsters, I'll go back to Metroid Dread for two of them, actually. I think that Experiment Z57 is just like a... And you know what? It's kind of funny, because like I feel like there's a difference between being like a regular old monster in a game, like Dragaiga in this game. He's just a regular old monster. But there's something creepy about Experiment Z57, you know? And I would say the same thing about Corpius. And Corpius is probably because of all the bloody mist and stuff in the room that you fight him in. But those two, I think, are really cool. And scary.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, both of them have really cool introductions, too. With Corpius, you know, you kind of just see, like, you know, this invisible husk in the background just kind of, like, chomping down on wildlife. And then you finally get to fight that later after it uncloaks. And then Z57, probably, honestly, I think maybe one of the best boss reveals in the series history, low-key. But just the way you just kind of stumble upon it in Dread, and it's literally just being, like, tased and prodded and whatnot. It's this really jarring scene that just kind of takes you back and like forces you to stop in a game where you're otherwise like trying to make a mad dash for it. And I kind of love when Metroid Dread has those moments where it just kind of has this shocking imagery that's just like, whoa, what's going on here? And then of course it's actually like this really subtle hint like, oh no, you're fighting that thing later. And it just so happens to be one of the best boss fights in the entire series.
Oh, totally. We should shout. It's not a boss, but maybe we got to shout out the Chozo Ghosts. Those are pretty.
Yeah, you know, that's fair.
The only thing about the Chozo Ghosts is they're definitely not scary because that theme kicks in whenever you fight them, and it's not like it's an action theme. It's not a you know. But I figured we can't go an episode talk about Halloween without shouting them out.
We actually never talked about this when we were discussing Wreck Ship, but like you don't really see a lot of like, you know, ghosts and entities and stuff like that in the Metroid series until Super Metroid, where it's a present in the Wreck Ship, and then you see it again in Prime, but otherwise you don't really see a lot of that. And so that definitely does stick out to me, particularly in the Wreck Ship. I feel like that makes it, you know, really stand on its own. But yeah, that is something that...
We were just dogging on Other M. We should also show that. I'm pretty sure there's some ghosts and stuff right before the Fantoon fight, too. Or at least, like, there's something that you fight... maybe it's during the Fantoon fight, but it's these little, like, apparitions or something that you encounter when you're fighting Fantoon.
Are you talking about, like, the hands that it sends out, or...?
Yeah, that might be it. I gotta admit, it's been a little bit...
Yeah, because before Fantoon, you just you face that enemy gauntlet in the hallway right before that.
You're right. It must be during the fight then. Yeah. But pretty. I like what they did with Fantoon actually in Other M. They made him this like celestial kind of being. I thought that was actually pretty cool. So I want to give that game some props before we.
Fantoon is great. Fantoon was the example I used in our favorite things about our least favorite Metroid games episode. He is phenomenal.
Yeah. So those are all the creatures I think are just like really kind of cool monsters. I'm gonna do something similar to the areas that I thought were scary but shouldn't be. And I'm gonna pick on a game one more time. People are probably tired of me picking on it. But man, I remember way back in the day being so amped to see Goria. Like, you're reading all of the lore about like this indestructible force that was locked away. And I remember seeing Goria for the first time and I was like, it's just like a guy. He just kind of looks like he just kind of looks like a regular guy. He kind of looks like Noxus. Like, I don't know. I was a little bit underwhelmed. And then I was very underwhelmed with Goria's second phase, where like you play hide and seek with it, and he's kind of like a big blob or whatever he's supposed to be. So I can't let you off the hook, Goria, this Halloween. I'm sorry.
Let's see, underwhelming Metroid enemies.
Gotta be like underwhelming like Metroid monsters that should scare you.
Yeah.
But they don't.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like the E.M.M.I is just kind of the big one right there that we were talking about earlier. Like, I feel like literally being the poster child of Dread, I feel like that enemy should have packed a bit more of a fearful punch. It packs a challenging punch on your first time. It definitely leaves an impact, but not one that left me like, that left me discomforted.
I think the scariest one is the one you see at the beginning of the game that's already like damaged.
Like, that
one's creepy.
I would agree.
And then the rest of them kind of get progressively. I mean, it's tough too because like they're all like these bright, like they kind of have like Ferrari colors on them, So it's tough and intimidating when you're like neon pink. Not that you can't do it, but it's tougher. But yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Really quickly, let's end on some fun here. I give you 3 games that are Halloween themed to play for the rest of your life. Doom, what are you picking?
Oh, putting me on the spot. Oh man, because I thought we were going to talk about movies, and I was kind of like, I got a few that I'm prepared for.
You know what?
Man, I don't.
How about you do movies? I'll do games. What about that?
Yeah, because I don't. I would probably put a Castlevania game on there. I don't know which one exactly. Maybe Dracula X. On the PSP, just because that was my very first Castlevania, and that like holds a special place. Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay. So that was my first Castlevania game ever. I played it after the Belmonts got revealed for Ultimate, and I was like, okay, they're in Smash now. I want to experience their series before the game comes out, and so I just on a whim decided to try Dracula X for the PSP, and turns out it's really awesome. And then you can actually unlock the original Dracula. Dracula X Chronicles for the PSP, but you can actually, because it's a remake of Dracula X, which was unreleased in America for the SNES, but you can actually unlock in the game, and so I ended up playing that right after, and I also really liked that, and so I feel, so maybe Dracula X Chronicles is cheating because it's 2 games in one,
that's okay.
But that would definitely be one of my picks, just because it holds a special place in my heart for introducing me to that series.
All right, I need some more. Buy me some more time. What? Okay, you give me your movies. I'll give you my games.
You know what? It didn't occur to me because I don't really consider it a scary game, but it's like I feel like I can put a Doom game in there, right? I can put a Doom game in there for my Halloween games, right? You know what? Just to go with the Halloween theme, let's do Doom 64 because I love Doom 64, and that one definitely has a bit more of a darker tone than the other games, where it's like typically you're playing a Doom game and you got these heavy metal riffs going on, these like 80s thrash metal riffs, or like Mick Gordon's like bonkers soundtrack. But whereas Doom 64, you have Aubrey Hodges' more experimental and ambiance driven soundtrack, where it's actually like a bit more tense and atmospheric and creepy. So you know what? I'm gonna count Doom 64. That's gonna be my number 2 pick.
Okay, I'll accept that. That's I played that actually a year or so ago now, and you're right. It's not like in your face, kind of like some of the other Doom titles as well. Well, you got a third. I gave you 3. You got 2. I'll tell you what. To buy you some time, let's go game for game here. I'll give you 2. I am going to take Alien Isolation, as game number 1 because there's just nothing quite like it. There really isn't. I've never played a game like Alien Isolation that's so unbelievably, almost overwhelmingly tense. Like I'm replaying it now, and I start on medium, and I was like, I think I should go to easy so that I can breathe. So that's definitely one. I think I'd have to go with you. I think I'd have to take a Castlevania, and I think I'd have to take Symphony of the Night. Although I might be tempted to take the Game Boy Advance collection.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities. You really can't go wrong.
So gotta be a Castlevania. Have you thought of a third yet? Because there's a bunch of other options. You know what? I've got it. If you're not ready.
Okay.
I am going to take... I'm sure that there is a bundle out there, so I'm going to cheat and just say both of them. I am going to take Costume Quest 1 and 2. This game, to anybody that's
I've never heard of either of those games.
Dude, you gotta play this game. It's awesome. It's number one, it's not scary. It's cute and charming, and it's just incredibly sweet. It's a role-playing game, so it's an RPG. And the idea is that you go knocking... there's an overworld or whatever, so like there's little quests and stuff like that, but you go knocking on doors, and if you get a goblin that answers the door, you have to fight him. And the kicker is that you transform into whatever costume you're wearing. So like if you're dressed up as like kind of a jet fighter or something like that, you'll, instead of like your costume, you'll be like this big jet, and it's really, really cool. And the sequel is just as charming because you're fighting all like the evil dentists who want to cancel Halloween. It's incredibly charming stuff. So I really liked it and had a lot of fun with it, actually. So that's my third pick, and it's like you don't get more Halloween than that.
All right. That's perfect. I did figure out what my third pick is going to be, and that's going to be Inside, which I think is a phenomenal platformer.
Good pick.
I played it for the first time a couple years ago. It kind of blew me away, and then I went onto YouTube immediately and like looked at all like the story theories, and I was just even more intrigued. That is just such a cool world and atmosphere. I haven't played... Oh, what's the game? The Limbo. I haven't played that yet. I know it's from the same creators. I definitely want to experience that as well because I heard it's like in that same vein.
It's pretty much like the same kind of game. Yeah, it's very creepy.
And Inside just absolutely like intrigued the hell out of me. So I love that. I do also want to give an honorable mention to Deadlight as well. I don't think it's quite as scary, but it's kind of like this 2D zombie platformer that's very atmospheric. I almost want to call it a Metroidvania, but I can't quite do it because it's very level-to-level basis. You're not like fully exploring like an ever-growing map, but it definitely, like, if you play it, you'll definitely get Metroidvania vibes. Right. That's the best way I can describe it, but it's definitely, I wouldn't call it a Metroidvania. It'd be more closer to like a traditional level 1 to level 2 to level 3 platformer more than anything, but it's got like the puzzle solving that you would expect in a Metroidvania, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I'll take the absolute low-hanging fruit here, throw my honorable mention, and I will just say Dead Space. Dead Space, maybe Dead Space 1 or Dead Space 2. Either one is fine, but yeah, low-hanging fruit, but does it for me. And that, my friends, is going to bring us to the end here. So that's our little trip down, no, I was going to say memory lane. I don't know, haunted lane. This analogy just went off the road. I'm sorry, but that is our.
Yeah, we are not doing good with the analogies today. No, I gotta say.
No, that was a tough one. I hope, God, if you're still here, I'm sorry for that. But yeah, that's our look at the scariest areas, moments, monsters, not so scary areas, moments, monsters in the Metroid series. Let us know if you agree, disagree, what yours are, what we left out, what we didn't include. What you actually, I'm really intrigued to think what you think should be scary but didn't quite hit for you. So let us know over in Discord. Come and hang out with us. Join and talk about Metroid. We're going crazy all day talking. I was actually a little bit jealous. I was at work and I couldn't get in on the chat as much as I wanted to. But yeah, let us know. And of course, we just want to wish everybody a fantastic Halloween. Hopefully you're not working like Doom and you're doing something, unlike me, who's just sitting at home. But yeah, let us... And hey, if you got any Metroid costumes out there, man, tag us over on Twitter. Tag us over on Blue Sky. We'd love to see that. That being said, we are going to get out of here. So, of course, we do want to encourage everybody to check us out wherever they get their podcasts. Go like, subscribe, recommend, rate, review, all that good stuff. And, hey, tell that Metroid fan in your life or they could get their weekly Metroid fix. There is one podcast on this planet Earth that is making a weekly Metroid show, and you're listening to it. So tell everybody where they could get their Metroid fix. OmegaMetroid.com has everything that you need if you're a Metroid fan. Guides, news, maps, you name it, it's there. Check us out over on YouTube. Subscribe, and we even have video walkthroughs over there as well. And not to mention every single episode of this podcast that's pretty much ever been done over on YouTube. So give us a sub over there. That'd be really cool. Check us out over on social. We are at Omega Metroid Pod, at Spiteri316, at Doominal Cross. And that, my friends, is going to do it for us. So have a happy Halloween, and we'll see you back here in November. Till then, take care.